This is the ultimate PowerPoint OS tutorial, going from pretty much knowing nothing about PowerPoint and how it works to creating the most advanced PowerPoint OS window systems. So we're going to start off with the absolute basics. But what even is a PowerPoint OS? To put it as concise as I can, it's making a PowerPoint presentation look like an operating system. Pretty much as simple as that. The big question is how? Now, if you think about it, if you've made a presentation before in PowerPoint, you'll know that everything's made out of shapes. That seems really obvious, but this text box, is it really a text box? Well, it's actually a rectangle. It's just with text in it. Pretty much everything else in the presentation will be made out of shapes in some way. Even a chart, although you can't directly edit it like it was a shape, there are shapes within the chart. So if I click on this, you can see it's just fixed, it's locked in place, but this is technically a shape. And guess what else is practically made out of shapes? Windows 10. I mean, these are all rectangles. These can all be made using PowerPoint shapes. So you can see where I'm driving at. Now, first things first, the prerequisites. We need to go to slideshow, set up slideshow, browse to kiosk. Do that every time you make a presentation. The reason you do that is because if you go into presentation mode and click on the background or use the arrow keys, you will go to the next slide. You don't want to do that if you don't want the user to be bypassing your password systems. So of course you're going to have to prevent that. And the easy way to do that is as I've just shown. If you're not too bothered about that, don't use it, but it does show these circle bits at the bottom, these presentation controls. They're very annoying, and I would definitely recommend doing this every time. It does mean every time you want the user to go somewhere, you have to either make them do that automatically or use hyperlinks. But that's pretty much done. That's all you need. But that's not all, of course. The developer tab, which you can enable manually, gives you access to code. Now, of course, you don't have to use code in your PowerPoint OS. If you just want to make it look like it and not function like it, that's absolutely your choice. But coding enables you to do something a little bit further with your PowerPoint stuff. These are ActiveX controls, for example. These let you interact directly with the presentation. So if you're going to click on this, you can edit text in it, which you wouldn't be able to do with a normal shape because you'd have to exit slideshow and then modify it. It enables you to write macros that will automate some tasks, and with automation of tasks you can also create your own preset tasks, which would be your functions. For example, opening a new window would be like building it from scratch and then adding it to the slide. Now, we're not going to go straight into the coding, that's going to be next tutorial, but we're going to have a look at shapes, and we're going to build our own concept PowerPoint OSs. And by the end of the tutorial, you would have made a decent enough looking replica of your favorite operating system or an operating system of your choice. You can even make one up. Secondly, we're going to make our design choices. Now, it's not all about the shapes, it's also about the text. You can have silly text or fancy text or plain text or book text. It really depends on what you're trying to do. But in PowerPoint OS, most UIs use a modern light font, which is what we're going to have to go for. So whenever you add a default shape, you'll notice that you type in it, this specific font comes up. It's a nice font, but it's kind of considered amateurish to use it all the time. So to change the default font, you need to go to Design, and then right under this little variants bit, that's the same for all versions of PowerPoint that from 2007 and onwards, you can go to Fonts. And then this little thing will bring you up with all these different font choices. Now, I've made so many presets because I've made so many fonts, but you will get the Office fonts list. And you can choose from the ones that you want, Century Gothic, or that has liner type there, so you don't really want anything that has too defined edges. It's a quite specific set of fonts, but you'll get used to when you see different fonts. If you see more examples of user interfaces, you'll have a sense for what kind of fonts work. So my recommendation, the one that I use all the time, is Bandschrift. That's installed on most machines. Of course, you don't have to use Bandschrift. In fact, I'm going to not do that because I use it all the time. I'm going to go for Trebuchet MS, which is quite a good font. choice. And of course, if you want to change your fonts to ones that aren't listed, you go to customize fonts, and then this little body font bit, you can also set the heading font, but the body font is usually when you type into stuff, so that's the one you should be setting, that you can choose from your font list with the font previews. Veranda's quite a nice one, but I'm going to keep it with Trebuchet. So now that we have that, let's move on to the color choices. Now, much like the fonts design section, it's just right here. Now, it is, again, considered not to the extent as fonts, but it's still considered a little bit amateurish to select a color scheme that's widely used, like either one of these two. Of course, the Office 2007 to 2010 scheme is not as widely used as the more modern Office alternative, but there's still, if you have a user who uses Office 2000 to 2010, they will think that choice is quite amateurish. So it's better, to be on the safe side, to go to these bottom ones here. All these are specific to a certain colour, which are great, but you want a bit of variety. So I go to from median to aspect. These are nice ones. I love aspect and slipstream, but I'm going to go for marquee for this one. Additionally, you can also, like the fonts, customize your colors here. So if you think, oh, that's the same as that one, I'm not going to have that, then you can go to more colors and you can select from here. I'm going to go for, I don't think there's a purple in there, is there? I like a purpley blue. I like those kind of colors. And there we go. That will be in your list. And of course, if you want to make this blue stronger, you can do the same for that. There's many different alleys of choice. I'm going to go for that. Next, we're going to get on to inserting shapes. Now, you can find them in three places. First of all, in Home, you can draw a shape like that. Next, you can go to Insert, and under Shapes, you'll have a tray like this. And also, once you've inserted shape, you can go to Shape Format and insert another shape here. Now, of course, whenever you see one of these, you know to insert shape. But just think Home, Insert, Format. That's where you would typically find them. That's if you have 2007 or later, which most people have. So I'm going to stick to that. Now, basic shape manipulation involves several things. First of all is the design of elements. Now, an element is pretty much what it says on the tin, an element. So in a UI, one individual thing in the UI is considered an element. For example, this little button here would be an element. This ribbon background thing would be an element. Elements can be groups of elements, but essentially you want a kind of color palette, but for elements. So in which case you're going to create a slide where you keep all your stuff. You're going to make it hidden by right-clicking Hide Slide, so it doesn't show up when you actually have the presentation. It's good to keep a catalogue of all your different shapes. If you don't like doing that, absolutely fine. You don't have to do this, but it's a good way of organising your stuff, so you don't have to find where you previously added stuff and go back to it. It'll all be on this slide. Additionally, if you want to create mouse over animations, that's a story for another time, then you can always go here. But how the hell are you going to make a button? Well, luckily, buttons can be assigned some actions, and buttons are essentially just shapes. So pretty much draw a rectangle if you want your button to be rectangular, which most buttons are. And then you can start fiddling around with the controls. So my advice is to right click, go to Format Shape. Now in earlier versions of Office you'll have a dialog for this, but in newer versions of Office from 2013 or onwards you'll have this little side pane. Figure out for me, so I prefer people just play around with stuff. Create the most over-the-top style button you can. That's a task. So you've probably created something hideously overcomplicated like this. That's good. If you continue making things like this, you'll know where all the options are and what they kind of do. Now, of course, I don't expect you to get it instantly, but those are the kind of things that you'll find are types of lines and gradients. You'll know how to change the text color and stuff like that, how to add ridiculous 3D effects to it, and in doing so you'll be able to tune those to create roughly what you want. Now, there are a couple of overlooked things, and things that you don't really discover by playing around. I'm going to go over those. So, a little known fact is you can also go to text options and go to this little text box thing. Now, you can use resize shape to fit text. So if you type stuff in here like it will automatically resize for you. You can also shrink text on overflow, which means you can do this and it will just automatically shrink to suit your needs. You can also wrap text in shape, so if you don't want that to happen, then it won't go to a new line automatically. If you do want that to happen, then it will. And the most important thing is margins. So anyone who's experienced will probably come across this annoying thing. I'm going to delete this because this is annoying. So if you've inserted a button and you've said hello, but you've made it really small, right? As soon as you get to a certain smallness, you want it smaller, but the text starts messing up for you. This is because of margins. So you need to go to text options and go to the margins section, and you can decrease the amount that the text will tolerate until it goes to the next line. So you can decrease this to 0 centimeters if you want it just to go absolutely right up to the edge like that, or you can increase it. And also, if you want to, let's say you're aligning from the left, right, but you want a little gap there without having to go every time, what you can do is go to the left margin and increase that up to the amount that you want. This is useful so you can have little icons right next to it. So if you wanted a little smiley face here, then you can always be able to do that by simply increasing the right margin. And there you go, there's a little button. The next stuff to know is about animations and the transitions. Now, if you're on PowerPoint 2007, these will be one tab. So if you go to animations, you'll have all the different transitions plus an animations pane and add animations, stuff like that. But from, I think, 2010 onwards, then you'll have 2 dedicated tabs. But either way, you're going to learn how to use these different tabs and the slideshow tab as well. But we're going to go over that a little bit later. So let's say you've decided to insert a couple of shapes. Now we're going to have some more practice on creating user interfaces soon, but I just want to show you how to optimize stuff. So let's say you wanted to automatically go to the next slide. Now instead of creating a startup message where you click something, it will take you to the next slide, what you can do is you can automatically set it to do that. You can go to transitions or animations if you're in 2007, and at the side right here at advanced slide you will have this little tick box here. If you tick that, that means it will automatically do stuff. Now this little delay here, this is minutes, seconds and milliseconds, not hours and stuff like that. You can't do that. But let's say I wanted to advance after 1 second, I would just toggle it like that. So let's, for the sake of visual impact, I'm just going to make this slide different from the other. And then I'm going to go into slideshow mode, and there we go. It changes automatically. This is an insanely useful tool that some people take a while to discover, so we'll make sure. Another important thing is if you're duplicating a slide and you want to make changes to it, but you don't want it to automatically go to the next slide, it will save that attribute. So you must go back, and then even decreasing it to 0 won't work, because that means it will go instantly to the next slide. It will just it will show it for 1 frame. So to get rid of that, you need to untick this box. Even if it has a value in it, unticking it will stop it from happening. So with that all out of the way, how do you actually go to other slides from within the OS? Well, you can do something called hyperlinking. If you go to Insert, and let's make another button. So I'm going to go to slide, actually this one, that automatically does it, okay. So I'm going to create a new button. I'm going to change its fill to, I don't know, this color, and I'm going to type into it so it automatically adds text. Click me. Right. Now if you click this button, usually nothing will happen. So how on earth do you add stuff? Insert, action, and you have this little action box. Now there are several options. You can hyperlink to the next slide, you can run a program, which isn't usually used, but you can also run batch files and stuff like that, but we won't go into that. And you can also run a macro if you've created a macro. That's useful for programming. We'll see that later. There's also the mouse over tab. Again, we won't use that very often, but that means that if your mouse enters the hitbox of this, then it will take you or do something with it. Now, hyperlink, you have many different options. You can either go to these preset options like next slide, previous slide, first slide, last slide views, end show. So end show is itself, it's a different command that will take you out of the presentation. Last slide viewed means you'll go back to the slide you were before you entered the current one. I know that sounds, but you'll if you play around with it, you'll get what that is. Custom show, again, this is more of a presentation feature, so you don't need to worry about that too much. Slide is extremely important. So if you don't want to go to the next slide or the previous slide or the first slide or the last slide viewed, then you can go to slide and you can select which specific slide that you want to go to. Now it's slide 3 for me. It would 4 even. Now it was the next slide, but just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to select slide 4. If you're in a rush and if you're having to add many hyperlinks, what you can do is you can use your oh, that didn't work. Okay, but you can use your keyboard to automatically select which slide. So if I go to slide and then I type 4, it will take me to slide 4 automatically and hit enter. That's a quick way of doing it. So that's the use of keyboard shortcuts. If you're not a keyboard shortcuts person, that's absolutely fine. You don't have to use keyboard shortcuts. It's just useful. So let's test it. If we go into slideshow mode, click it, and there we go. It goes to the next slide. You can see where this is headed. So if you have one slide that has the background in it and one slide that has the apps in it, then you've created a little apps tray. And of course you can do the same thing that does the opposite. So let's say I wanted to go to the last slide viewed, which is how that works. You can go to last slide viewed like that, and that will click me to go back, and that will take you back. So if you test that, you can click me to go back, and you can keep spamming those like that. Of course, if you start off on this slide, then it doesn't do anything because there was no last slide viewed, but you get what I'm saying. So now let's go on to animations. Let's say you wanted to, I don't know, make this slick PowerPoint OS that you've always wanted to make that has lots of animations. It's really cool. How the hell would you do that? Well, you'd enlist the help of the animations tab. You go straight to animations and you get this, in 2010 and later, you get this little bar of stuff. Now, in later versions, it's quite confusing. The earlier versions did it better. But of course, the simple thing is to always go to add animation. Don't use this little bar here unless your thing will only have one animation in it. The reason is it's very easy to replace an animation you already have by thinking this will add a new one. It doesn't. And it's really annoying. So you need to go to add animation, make that default. Only go here if you especially want to change an animation. Now, there are entrance, emphasis, and exit effects. So those are the 3 types. Usually you're going to use entrance or emphasis, but if you want to get rid of stuff, like if you're animating the logo of your PowerPoint OS, then you'll use these a lot. But essentially, these are your animations. Now, of course, there are way more than that, but those are the basic ones. If you go to more entrance effects, then you get a whole library of them. Now, I'm going to do, you can experiment with this stuff, absolutely. So just go over some animations and see which ones are cool and which ones are subtle enough to be integrated into an OS without feeling too over the top. But of course, make it over the top for now, because that's the way that you get to learn stuff. Now, other things that you can do is, the most common is fly in. So let's say you wanted something to come in from the left. Now, it seems a bit amateurish because if you look at it, it goes in quite plainly. It just goes in, it doesn't have much. It's like, it's every single frame, it goes the same amount. Basically, it looks very robotic. So if you want to make something look more slick, here's my advice. Now, first of all, you've got to learn that on click, you don't want to use that, especially if you're in kiosk, because there is no click. It won't activate the animations. So I'd always recommend start with previous. And that basically means that it will go with the other animation. If you wanted to come afterwards, then by sure use start after previous. But have a little feel around on the timeline. If you don't know how to get the timeline, it's the animations pane here. Or there's in 2007, I think there's an advanced timeline thing. But anyway, so let's say I wanted to make this slick. I'm going to go to expand this little arrow there and then go to effect options. Now, if it's a fly-in effect or certain basic effects, you will have this little thing that allows you to feather the animation. This is extremely useful. So let's say you wanted to have one that goes like that. My audio explanation is quite hard, but if you see, that looks way more modern, doesn't it? It's coming in and then coming to a halt, it's decelerating. If you wanted to do the opposite, to go whoop, then you can do that. And it starts accelerating towards you, but that doesn't look as modern. It looks a bit trippy, so I would still recommend smooth end. If you want to do both at the same time, so let's say you wanted to come in like that, then you can always use that. It's more like a subtle version of smooth start. Of course, if you're using a different type of effect, we'll come over this soon, then you want to balance those two. But I would still, for entrance effects, always use smooth end. Now bounce end is weird, so this makes it goes boing boing when you like that. It kind of goes all the way and then it comes back. It's a bit overkill. I would use with caution. 0.06 is, oh, that's not very good either. Let me try and demonstrate it. Halfway is about right. If it's that kind of OS, I would think that it's warrantable, but I would still always go for smooth end. You don't have to have animations, by the way. This is just if you want to spice up stuff. So, without all out of the way, we're going to go on to some more animation options. Now, there are not just entrance effects, there are also emphasis, exit, and motion paths. So, emphasis effects are also not very widely used, but they're useful. So let's say you wanted to make your thing spin. Now, this doesn't get rid of it or enter it, so that's why it's under emphasis. But what you can do is you can make it spin, pretty much. Again, spin, you can also feather stuff. Now, with emphasis effects, because there's no start and end, I would still recommend smooth start and smooth end to be about equal this time. The reason is, because let me demonstrate, if you have smooth start on all the time, then it looks like that, and it kind of stops in the middle. So you don't want to have that. You can also change the degrees. So if you're mathematical and you want a specific degree, like, I don't know, 467, by all means go ahead and it will correspond to that. You can also select from presets, so 2 spins, forgive me if I'm wrong, but it would be 720 degrees, so that's right. And that will do 2 spins like that. And there's half spins, quarter spins, and of course you can change clockwise or anti-clockwise if you're American counterclockwise, and do things like that. You can also, here's another thing, I know there's a lot here, but you can also repeat animations and change their duration. You can always change their duration by dragging the sides of them on the timeline, but you'll discover that. Repeat, you can repeat a certain amount of times, but there's no custom repeats, I think. Hang on. What if I do that? Okay, never mind. You can have custom repeats. I didn't actually know that. That's under the timings tab. But these are the presets, and one of them is until end of slide. So that will keep doing that animation for as long as you have the slide open. I mean, it will just keep going. Actually, because this is on automatic, it will just go back to itself, so I need to do that. But that will just keep going until you decide to change the slide. Now, There's a really powerful animation tool. It's called triggered animations, and this is where we're going to combine our knowledge of shapes and add it to animations by creating a start menu. First of all, add your different elements. So I'm going to go back to my first hidden slide. I'm going to create a taskbar, and to do that I just need to elongate this like this. I'm going to go to shape format, set no outline because I don't want it to really have an outline. I'm going to make it black, and I'm going to have a little button here that opens it. This is very basic. You'll probably come up with something much better, but this is just my real quick thing. And then you'll also have a menu which will be a slightly different color, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And we'll have a button in there just to make sure you get the idea. So now we copy all that into our slides, and we have our little basis for stuff. So before we get into that, I'm going to show you a few tools that you can use when resizing or editing your shapes, and this makes things really easy. This will only be a little minute montage before we get back on topic. When adding shapes, you can hold down Shift to keep the X and Y axis in proportion, or you can hold down Control to resize from the center instead of the edge. When done, you can also do the same things with resizing. And if you want to be really clever, you can hold down Shift when rotating an object, and it will correspond to very specific degrees. You can do the same thing with a keyboard shortcut. Hold down Alt and use the arrow keys to move around by a specific amount. And of course you can do that by moving shapes. If you want to move by a specific amount, very small increments, you can click the arrow keys to move up, down, left and right. Holding down Shift while doing that will resize at that amount. To copy a shape, Ctrl C as you usually do. To paste, Ctrl V. To cut, Ctrl X. To paste again, Ctrl V. If you want to paste as a picture, right click, paste as picture, and it will paste as a picture for you. You can also paste at different types, like use destination theme, or for more advanced options, go to paste special and choose the type of object that you want to paste as, for example a specific JPEG image. You can also duplicate. Hold down Ctrl and D to duplicate. It will duplicate by a specific increment, which you can change to be relative to the previous shape, and holding down Ctrl D again will remember what increment you used. Moving it twice and then duplicating will then go back to the original increment. You can also duplicate by holding down Ctrl and dragging, or right click dragging and then selecting move here, or right click dragging and then copy here to duplicate. If you don't like having multiple shapes, moving them by the same amount and trying to align them, what you can do is you can group them to become one entity. To select multiple shapes, hold down Control and click multiple shapes. Sometimes, if a shape has a hyperlink that goes to the next slide, doing so will then take you to that slide. You don't want to do that. So you can also, as an alternative, use Shift to highlight multiple shapes. Once selected, you can move them in Unity. And of course, if you wanted to create them as one object, Ctrl G for group. Once you've done that, they will all stay relative to each other when you resize them. However, not doing so will resize them relative to each individual shape. You can also rotate them like that, and if you want to move and rotate at the same time, you can group and then ungroup to rotate them and move them at the same time. To ungroup a group of shapes, Ctrl-Shift-G. Also, if you have multiple shapes selected, so long as they're the same type of shape, as in one's not a chart or a table or something, you can change the shape color or attributes and they will all do the same for each different shape. If you want to edit a shape's text, which is useful for making buttons, you can press F2 to quickly enter the text frame and F2 again to exit, or use escape. You can also type once selected straight into it and it will automatically enter the text frame. To change the font size while you're in it, go to F2, type something, and then Control Shift and then the full stop or the comma to increase or decrease the size of the text. Although, if you want to have a more specific type of text, I'd still recommend going to this little section and typing in. So back on track, now that we've copied our, well, I need to actually do that, copy our elements here. These shapes, we want to do we want to do these to multiple shapes. So for example, if you have multiple tiles on this start menu, you don't want to have to add a separate animation for each one. Unless you want to move them in a separate way, then that's absolutely fine. But I'm not going to do that. So what am I going to do? I'm going to group them, as we've just explored. If you can't remember, the shortcut is Control-G for group, quite a basic one. If you don't like what you've done, Control-Shift-G, so Shift is like the alternate of, well, so is Alt, but you know what I mean. Right, so now we can go to animations, and we're going to have, first of all, a fade animation for entrance, or you can have a fly in. I'm going to have it from the side, and I'm going to go to the animation pane, effect options, and have the smooth end on. So that will make it quite slick. And of course I'm going to add another animation to get rid of it. So this is going to be fly out. Of course I'm going to actually have that to go to the left like that. And I'm going to go to effect options and smooth end again. So that's our two little things. Secondly, you want it to, this little thing to change colour. Now that's an emphasis effect, right? So if you go to object colour, then you can change the colour to whatever you want. I'm gonna, when it's not clicked, it will be this color. So I'm gonna add one for that one. I'm gonna make that quite short, so I'm gonna make that 0.2 seconds to go quite quickly. And then I want to do another animation that does the same thing, but for an object color to go to the highlighted one, which will be a blue. And I'm going to again change the amount to 0.2 seconds. Now at the moment, these do nothing. Oh, well, it's hidden because we haven't done anything to make these happen when you click this. But of course, we want the animations to happen when you click the little reddish orangey thing. Now, the wonderful triggered animations is right here. So first of all, select all the animations that you want to happen when you click the object. So those will be the entrance effects for this and the changing of the colour. That's that group 37 green bit, and it was, I think, the second emphasis effect. What you can do is you can go to trigger on click of. Now if you know the name of that little thing, then I'd recommend just doing it. But if you don't know the name of it, you either look it up or you can go to the selection pane and rename it and find it later. But on click of, I know it's called rectangle 30 because I selected that. I remember adding it to as a fourth animation, and it helpfully tells you what it was called. So I'm going to click rectangle 30. Now if you actually click this, it's going to do two things. If you click it once, it will do the first one. If you click it second, it will highlight it. We don't want that. So we're going to leave it, by the way, as a clicked animation. And we're going to have this one go at the same time as the previous one. So if we go back to this, you can open it like that. How fun. But of course, we know all this, we don't want to keep opening it because that's counterintuitive. So we're going to do the same thing for these. We're going to go, triggered animation on click of rectangle 30. And we're going to set this to with previous. So every time there's a click, that will represent how many times you clicked it. So on the first click, it will do this. On the second click, it will do that. Okay. Therefore, it figures because this bit's second, it will have to have it hidden by default. So if you have an entrance first thing on the timeline, like at the top, it will automatically be hidden. If you have an exit or an emphasis effect first, then it will be automatically shown before the effect happens. So you have to do that in that order. Of course, you can just reorder stuff by doing this, but I'm going to keep it like that. If we go into slideshow, click that, it will open. Click that again, it will close. How neat! Now this is really good for start menus, and it looks really slick. And remember, you don't need any code for this. You can combine this with code and it'll look pretty good, but it's still really smooth to just have animations. So for your first PowerPoint OSs, I definitely recommend doing this. There's absolutely one last cool tool to use before we start putting these into use, all these skills. So, if you recall, I want multiple animations for one shape. Sure, you can have them go after each other, but there's a really cool trick. You can also make 2 entrance animations happen at once, and PowerPoint, depending on which ones they are, will either combine them or override them. So, different types, like let's say float in and fly in aren't compatible because they do the same kind of thing, but split, wipe, and shape and wheel should be able to go with fly in. So I'm going to add a wipe animation, and I'm going to set that at the same time with previous. Now, watch what happens. Isn't that cool? It plays both animations at the same time. You can combine multiple animations on the same object, and it will add some more advanced animation. So this stuff is really good. I'm not going to use wipe. I'm actually going to use shape. Now I'm going to go to out. I'm going to have circle, and for more effect options, I'm going to select some more preferences. There's not many preferences. I'm going to make that quite fast. Now there's no smoothing of this, so it'll just happen like that. In fact, I'm going to make that quite a bit faster. But if I open it like that, it does that. Now, the next tutorial will include putting all these skills into use and structuring your PowerPoint OS and creating your first little idea. Now, of course, if you're feeling brave and you already know a lot about PowerPoint, I don't know why you would have watched this tutorial, but if you're just watching for the extra bits of information that you might not have already known, then you can go straight into the base OS tutorials if you haven't done those already, which are on my channel. And if not, if you're a complete noob, then you can wait until the next tutorial. So, hope this has been fun, and I will see you in the next one. If you thought this was quite fun and you've learned something today, you can always subscribe or comment or like. Absolutely your choice. I'm not going to force you, obviously, and that would be much appreciated. But until then, goodbye.